It's a Wednesday. Thanks so much for joining us here on the JMULL show. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. Per usual, really appreciate you joining us on another week of 110 Sports. We got a lot of stuff up on the site right now, from NBA draft regrades to Chris Brown breaking down just the absurdity that is Major League Baseball. We're going to get to that here in the second segment, by the way. But a lot of stuff going on over there. We got another episode of The Bonfire coming up later this week. We have Brendan King, the play-by-play voice of the South Bend Cubs, who won a championship last year, talking to him about COVID-19, what he's doing as a broadcaster when his summer plans probably were completely scrapped as a result, as well as some other things in just baseball in general. He's a pleasure to talk to, a pleasure to listen to, and if you haven't checked that out, you can find The Bonfire on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as the website. But it's a Wednesday. We've got games from the NBA playoffs to talk about. We'll get to baseball here in a little while. But so let me set the agenda here for you. We're going to talk a lot of NBA today. Some of my thoughts from the first two rounds of the playoffs, or the first 2 days of the playoffs. Every series has played one game at this point. So we'll chat about that at the top of the show here. Then we're going to talk about baseball and this Fernando Tatis bull crap that is just absolutely ridiculous, and Major League Baseball just can't get out of their own way, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes as well. Then we'll do FY. We'll get out of here, but I want to start with the 1 versus 8 matchups, because we sit here 2 days after the beginning of the NBA playoffs. We had Monday, we had Tuesday. On Tuesday, the Bucks and the Magic played, and the Lakers and the Trailblazers played. Listen, you've had pretty much the results that you were expecting to have. The Nuggets just outscored the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell had 57 points, and they still couldn't get it done. That's going to be the story of that series. The Raptors handled the Nets. The Celtics are just a little too much for the Sixers without Ben Simmons. I think that's pretty much what I was looking at there for that series. And the Mavericks, Doncic played really well, and that series was close. And I think and that game was close. So I think that'll be the case there as well. And then yesterday, you had the Heat just be a little too much for the Pacers. The Rockets, James Harden had 37 points, and we'll get into that game a little bit more here. But you had the 1 versus 8s in both conferences. And sitting here 2 days later, you've got 2 8 seeds that are up in these playoff series, first round playoff series. And the NBA first round is notoriously bad, except for, the 4-5 is pretty consistently interesting. But the NBA first round is notorious for just incredibly boring first round matchups. And part of that's because, the Warriors have been the 1 seed for the last 5 years or whatever, or one of the top seeds. The bottom teams, and even the Western Conference, and the bottom teams, certainly in the Eastern Conference, are just not good basketball teams. The most interesting 1 versus 8 that comes to my head immediately is all the way back in 2011 when the Grizzlies beat the Spurs in the 2011 first round of the Western Conference playoffs. It's notorious for being boring. Now, this Portland-LA series was never going to be boring, but I thought this Milwaukee-Orlando series was absolutely going to be boring. But here's what happened, and I want to talk about both games. We'll talk about the Bucks and the Magic first. 122-110. Giannis had 31 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 assists. The dude showed up, big time. 12 of 25 from the field. He did have 5 turnovers, but when you have the ball in his hands as much as he does, you're gonna turn the ball over some. But here's the issue, man. And we've been talking about this for a long time, but Chris Middleton is the number 2 guy on this team. And that in and of itself is not a bad thing. I want to make that clear right now. That in and of itself, not a bad thing for the Bucks. Chris Middleton is an all-star, a elite player, great on both ends of the floor. That's not in and of itself a bad thing. But it is a bad thing when he doesn't play well. And in terms of number 2 guys on NBA title contenders, he's probably the most, we'll use the phrase up in the air, of those second guys on top teams. 14 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 turnovers on 4 of 12 shooting and 2 of 6 from the 3-point line in 31 minutes. That's not going to get it done. Not going to get it done at all. Now, Giannis only played 34, and it's probably because they were trying to gauge how much they can play him and get away with this series. I would expect him to play more in the next game. Having your star on the bench for 14 minutes in a playoff game is just not all that typical. For comparison, Damian Lillard played 43 minutes. CJ McCollum played 42 minutes. Anthony Davis played 39 minutes, and LeBron James played 41 minutes. Only one other player on that list played under 40 minutes, and he played 39. Chris Middleton only played 31. Vucevic, 37. He had 35, 14, and 4 in Game 1 against the Bucks. They're gonna have to play Giannis more, and Middleton was on the bench for 17 minutes. Whatever it is, foul trouble, just trying to, this rotation. You can't play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 guys in the playoffs. You can't. Shrink the rotation. Only 9 guys played for Orlando. Only 8 guys played for Portland. Now, Zach Collins didn't play because of an ankle injury, so it would be 9. 10 players played for the Lakers. I would be willing to guess, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd be willing to guess that nobody else played 12 players. Get a rotation, get a core. Budenholzer's a great coach. That's not what this is about. But get a core, get a rotation, and go win this series where you're clearly the better basketball team. Just go win the series, for crying out loud. 122, 110. And look, Eric Bledsoe, 5 of 11. They were only 14 of 42 from the 3-point line. They made, other than Giannis, nobody else could beat them. George Hill was your second leading scorer with 16 points. That can't happen if you want to win playoff series. Clearly. Because they just lost to the Magic in pretty convincing fashion. The Magic controlled this game for a lot of it. And they made a run late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, and actually got the lead back. But then the Magic controlled again, and they lost by 12. You should never be losing by 12 on a neutral court if you're the Bucks. It's the Magic. And this is a Magic team without Aaron Gordon and a Magic team without Jonathan Isaac. This isn't even a full-strength Magic team. This is a Magic team that couldn't chase down the Nets in the 8 seeding games in which they were only half a game back at the beginning of the seeding games. They missed out on the 7 seed by 3 games. Are you serious? Really? You're going to let this team do that to you? And here's what they did. The Magic shot the 3-point shot really, really well. And they made they forced Chris Middleton. They shut down Chris Middleton. You can either force Chris Middleton to beat you, or you can just shut him down and let Giannis go. And 14 points from Chris Middleton. The Bucks are not going far in these playoffs. He could probably average 16 in the series, and they would win the series. They could probably do that. But if he's not averaging 22 to Giannis' 30, they're not winning a second-round series. Not against the Heat. Especially not against the Heat, who have a guy in Bam Adebayo who has a chance to be really good against Giannis on the defensive end. And then you have Jimmy Butler to put on Chris Middleton. Not a shot. Not a shot that the Bucks win that series if they play like they did in Game 1. Have the Bucks learn their lesson. I mean, Giannis has 31 and 17, but who on that team do you feel good about guarding Giannis? James Ennis? Not a whole lot of people you feel good about it. There are guys on that Bucks team, on that Heat team, multiple guys on that Heat team that I feel good about guarding Giannis. You've got Bam, of course. He'll be the go-to. You've got Jimmy Butler, who is just a tenacious defender and will give him trouble. And then you've got Andre Iguodala, who is a bona fide winner. And you know what he can do for a playoff team. It's an NBA Finals MVP there. Clearly, he can perform in the playoffs. The Bucks play like this, they're not getting very far. And then the conversation is wide open about who represents the East. I already think it's wide open. The Bucks making it to the Eastern Conference Finals to the finals and representing the East is not a foregone conclusion. And you saw it against the Magic. Giannis played well. Basically 50% shooting, 17 rebounds, 7 assists. You got nothing really from Wesley Matthews. They didn't shoot the 3-ball well. And if they play like this, if they don't play great defense, now they're not great defense as average defense, but the Magic were 16 of 41 from the 3-point line. And 18 of 19 from the free throw line. It's really hard to win basketball games if you're giving that up to the opponents, even when you're the Bucks and even when you have Giannis. Now, the Magic scored 122 points in this game. I don't expect them to score that many ever again in this series. But scoring 114, 110, 112, 111 would have won you this game. That's not all that out of the question. I'm a little concerned about the Bucks. But we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm not going to pick the Bucks to lose this series. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm also not convinced they're going to win it. I'm also not completely convinced they're going to win it. Let's talk about the Trailblazers and Lakers. 193, another game where the Lakers score less than 100 points. That now makes it 1, 2, 3, 4 of their 9 games that they've played in the bubble that they haven't scored 100 points. And one of those games that they did score 100 points, they scored 101 points. They've only scored more than 111 twice. And you're worried about the same things again after this first playoff series. You got 28 from Anthony Davis and 23 from LeBron. 23, 16, and 17 from LeBron. He was great. 28 and 11 from AD. And then you got 10 from Danny Green, but he was 4 of 12 from the field and couldn't make an open three-pointer to save his life. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was 0 of 9 from the field for 1 point. Kyle Kuzma had 14 on 5 of 14 shooting. And nobody else had more than 6. And the result is a Trailblazers team who was 13 of 34 from the three-point line. Nurkic had a respectable game with 16. Gary Trent Jr. only had 5 points. CJ and Dame combined for, 17 of 41? Now, they combined for 55. But that wasn't a great performance from the Trailblazers. And the Lakers only scored 93 and lost by 7. And it really wasn't in question in the last minute. There were a couple chances for it to get closer. But it wasn't really in question. And the Trailblazers didn't even have Zach Collins. Didn't even have him. And they scored 100 and win by 7. That's not even that impressive, 100 points. With 100 points, let's play that game. With 100 points, With 100 points, the Trailblazers would have lost to every team that lost in their first game of the playoffs. The losing teams in these 8 games so far: the Jazz 125, the Nets 110, the Sixers 101, the Mavs 110. The Bucks 110, the Pacers 101, the Thunder 108, and then you had the Trailblazers who scored 100. They just happened to score 100 against the team that scored 93. LeBron's going to have to, like, AD and LeBron are going to have to score 35 each. They're just going to have to. AD had 28 on 24 shots. LeBron had 23 on 20. He dished out 16 assists and had 17 rebounds, so he was great. But that's really uninspiring. Really uninspiring. I don't feel good about that. Not in the slightest. I mean, do you? Do you feel good about it? I wouldn't feel good about it at all. They have to have Danny Green has to shoot it better. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has to give them something in 29 minutes. Something in 29 minutes. Not 1 point, 1 rebound, and 3 steals. Give them something, man. Something. Coming up next, we're going to talk the rest of the playoff series. We'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Wednesday, whenever you might be listening to this, because we're recording. Don't worry, it should be live again on Friday. Having some computer issues, getting those taken care of, and we should be good to go. If not for Friday, definitely the beginning of next week. But we just broke down 1 through 8. Sorry about that. We just broke down 1 through 8. Now let's take a look at what happened around the rest of the association. Listen, in the Jazz-Nuggets series, the Jazz were never going to score enough points to win this series. And without Mike Conley, it makes it even harder. He left for the birth of his child. He should be back. But it looks like they might have to get to a 5th game. They have to win a game for it to matter if Mike Conley gets back. But that's the plan so far, for him to be back in the first round. So that'll help a little bit. But you got 57 points from Donovan Mitchell on 19 of 33 shooting, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. And you still lost by 10. You got 19 from Ingles and 17 from Gobert. And then you got 18 from Clarkson. So you had 4 guys in double figures. But then you had 1 point from Emmanuel Mudiay, 0 points from Tony Bradley, 3 points from Mr. O'Neal, and 3 points from Juwan Morgan. That's it. 14 points combined from those players. That's not going to get it done even when you have a guy almost score 60. And that's the gist of this series. That's why Utah was never going to win this series. They just don't have enough scoring. It's so hard. Spite had 57. And it still wasn't all that close. They were never in control of this basketball game. Mitchell kept it close. The Nuggets got 36 from Murray. He was spectacular on 13 of 20 shooting. Jokic, 29 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists. Michael Porter Jr. had 13 and 8. Still a fine performance from the first-time playoffer. You got 19 from Jeremy Grant, off the bench. You got double digits from another scorer. This is still without Gary Harris and Will Barton. It's never all that close. And it will continue to not be all that close. Because even if Donovan Mitchell scores 45, they lose by 22. You know what I mean? Like, this is the same thing that I was thinking about when, who was it? Somebody had an obscene amount of points. in one of the first games. And they still barely won. I'm blanking on who that was at the moment. Maybe I can figure it out real quick, but it was one of the first games of the bubble. And he scored an incredible amount of points. They only won a game by 6. I'm blanking on who it was. The point being is that Donovan Mitchell's not going to score 57 again. He's not going to do it. Oh, it was TJ Warren. That's who it was. TJ Warren scoring 53, against the Sixers in their first game, and they only won by 6. It didn't make me feel any different about the Pacers. And the Jazz don't have a chance in this series because they still lost by 10 when a dude had 60. And they had to win that game. They almost had to win that game. Raptors and Nets, you knew, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, they played 13 players, so I'm sorry I said earlier about how I would bet that nobody played more people than the Bucks did. The Nets did. There you go. But the Raptors were exactly what you thought the Raptors were going to be. You got 18 from Siakam. He has to be better. He does, but not against the Raptors, especially when Anunoby and Gasol add 13 and 12 apiece. Lowry has 16. Fred VanVleet has 30. Serge Ibaka goes for 22 on 8 of 14 shooting. You get 11 from Terrence Davis. They did exactly what you thought they were going to do. Brooklyn was 13 of 42 from the three-point line. That Toronto, they had balanced scoring, and they played great defense. Good defense. That's exactly what I was expecting from Toronto. That series isn't going to be close. I went with the Raptors in 4. I also went with the Bucks in 4, but I went with the Raptors in 4. I just think that they're mad, and I think that they're ready to prove something, and the Nets are without a real scorer. 15 assists for Karis LeVert. That's impressive, but it's exactly what you thought the Raptors were going to be, and exactly how I thought that series was going to end up going. The Sixers just aren't enough without Ben Simmons. Al Horford only had 6. Tobias Harris had 15 on 15 shots. That's not good enough. Embiid was good, 26 and 16. Shake Milton, 13 points on 5 of 7 shooting. That's solid. Alec Burks came off the bench, got you 18, but it just wasn't enough. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum combined for 61 points. Jason Tatum, 32 and 13. You got 19 points and 5 assists from Kemba Walker. Gordon Hayward had 12. Not a great shooting night. They're going to need a little bit more bench production, that's for sure. They only got 8 points off the bench. But even with just 8 points off the bench, Marcus Smart was 0 of 5 with 32 minutes. That probably won't happen again. But you got to have better bench production to beat teams when you get deeper into the playoffs. But when we're talking about this series, Philly's just too one-dimensional. They're too slow. They don't shoot it well enough. They were 9 of 27 from the three-point line. They out-rebounded them. You knew they were going to do that. But they had 18 turnovers. They didn't shoot it well enough. They only shot 46% from the field. That's going to be the story. And they might win one of these games. I would actually think that they probably will win one of these games because Embiid goes and scores 39. And you get better performances from Tobias Harris. And it just all comes together for one game. Maybe 2, maybe. But they're just not enough without Ben Simmons. They're just not. They're deep. They're much deeper than last year's team. And still they have the depth that they, even without Ben Simmons, have the depth that they didn't have last season. But without Simmons, they're just not good enough. Shake Milton, Josh Richardson, and then you got Embiid, Harris, and Horford. But Shake Milton is your starting point guard. And I will continue to harp on this, that I don't want Shake Milton to be my starting point guard. He's probably 16th in the rankings of the starting point guards in this playoffs. Maybe 15th if you're talking about whoever is technically the Nets starting point guard right now. It's just not It's just not a title contending team without Ben Simmons. It's that simple. It's that simple. Mavs, Clippers. Listen. Doncic proved that if he plays well, now he had a triple double, almost a triple double in points, assists, and turnovers. He actually could have had a quadruple double. He only needed 3 more boards and 1 more assist to get that quadruple double. But Porzingis has to be better. 20 points, 14 points, 20 minutes. You got to have more from him. But even without him doing much, you got 18 from Tim Hardaway Jr., but Kleber was bad. Seth Curry was solid off the bench, knocked down 50% of his 3-pointers, but they only lost by 8. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard combined for 56. Combined for 56, you got 19 from Marcus Morris. Zubac had 10. Lou Williams had 14 off the bench. There's still a couple question marks here and they're not super deep right now. And you're not sure you're going to get Harrell at all. But, and what kind of Harrell you're going to get when he comes back. They won by 8. The Clippers are going to win this series, but Doncic had 42. 13 of 21 shooting. He just turned the ball over too much. They committed 21 turnovers, and Doncic was responsible for 11 of them. That's too many, and he'll have to improve on that. But listen, they all lost by 8. PG and Kawhi Leonard played well. I mean, PG is more so than Kawhi, but neither of them are, 39, 40 to 44 point scorers. Not to the level of James Harden or Giannis or even Anthony Davis. They're going to live around that 30 points per game. I would expect that most games you're going to get somewhere around 60 points from those 2 players combined. And then it's up to those guys in between, those Lou Williams, Morris. Montrezl Harrell had 6 points in 15 minutes. It's up to those guys around, and that's why they're so scary, because when Lou and Montrezl Harrell are clicking, they're the best pick and roll duo in the NBA. But when they're not clicking, I mean, they combined for 20 points on 6 of 15 shooting. These are 2 guys that average around 20 points, 18, 19, 20 points. And that's where this team gets really scary. But when they're not playing phenomenally, and when Montrezl Harrell is still trying to get his feet wet still, 60 points from those 2 guys, and then you're hoping you can piece enough points together to win is there's not as much room for error. And if you get a better game from Kristaps and a few less turnovers from Luka, look at the team stats. I'm not sure if we get points off turnovers here. We do. They got 13 points off turnovers. Them being the Clippers off of those 21 turnovers. We'll see if it gets closer, if it gets farther away. If Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell play well, it's going to not be particularly close. But if they stay around this area and Kristaps gets a little better, then we're talking about an interesting series here, but not one that's going to result in anything other than the Clippers winning, which is exactly what we were expecting. But let's hop over to the Eastern Conference right now. Let's get the loading here, you know what I'm saying? Tuesday, yesterday, we talked about the Bucks already. We talked about the Blazers already. Heat and Pacers. The Pacers just aren't going to be good enough. I mean, TJ Warren had 22. Victor Oladipo played 9 minutes and had 4 points. But this is what we've been talking about. If TJ Warren comes back to earth at all, they're not going to win basketball games. 101 points. You got 22 from Brogdon. Nobody else scored more than 11. It's not going to get the job done. It's pretty much that simple. Jimmy Butler had 28. Dragic in the starting lineup. Kendrick Nunn not playing in game 1. Dragic, 24 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. He came to the Heat to be that point guard. He was good in Phoenix, and then was sort of that backup for Steve Nash, stepped into that role when he left, and he's a good ball player. Bam at 17, 10, and 6. That's literally what that's what you want from Bam. He had 3 blocks as well. Those are literally his averages. Jimmy, 28 points on 8 of 15 shooting. Efficient. Very. Duncan Robinson needs to be better for this team to really contend. 6 points on 2 of 8 shooting. You just got to be a little bit better than that. Tyler Hero had 15 points off the bench on 5 of 9 shooting. If you can get that from him most nights, that's really, really helpful. The Pacers just aren't going to be enough because TJ Warren's not a superhero. And when he comes back to the earth just a little bit, they're going to struggle. The Rockets, a 15-point W. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 9 points. And Dennis Schroeder, 6 points. That's the story here. That 3-guard lineup is awesome. Chris Paul had 20, 10, and 9. 1 assist short of a triple-double. Gallinari had 29. You're just going to have to be a little better. Those other 2 guards along with CP3. James Harden had 37 and 11. Jeff Green had 22. That's pretty good. He's one of those guys, like, sometimes he looks like the best player on the floor, sometimes he's non-existent. But it's not like, and that might be troublesome for them, but it's not like Harden went for 50. But you just need a little bit more from those Thunder guards, and they should be fine. I still think that the Thunder will win this series in 7. But not a phenomenal start for the Thunder. And then finally, we talked about the other games. So that's it. That's everything. That's the first 2 games. We got more games today. Today's Wednesday. We're about to have games here in just a little while, 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, just in 2 hours from now. You got the Nets, Raptors, and you got Jazz, Nuggets once again. Sixers, Celtics, and Mavericks, Clippers. You're going to have the same, because it's every other day kind of stuff now without having to travel. You're going to have the same group of games every day. But, we have another Mavs, Clips, another Sixers, Celtics game. It's going to be awesome. But that's the schedule for today. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Major League Baseball and then hit some FYI and get out of here. It's making me, I can feel my blood boiling already with Major League Baseball, and we haven't even started talking about it. We'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us, 110sportsmedia.com. Twitch.tv/110sports. Not live there today, of course, because we're recording this, but that's where we usually are. Touchline Talk, Around the Bases with Chris Brown. Josh Doring is the host of Touchline Talk, Soccer, Baseball. We got this radio-style show here. If you haven't checked out those shows, haven't checked out what's on the site, on the YouTube channel, please check out all of those things. Would really, really appreciate that. But what I want to talk about now is, like, come on, Major League Baseball, come on. The most recent installment of let's talk about how Major League Baseball managed to trip over their own shoelaces once again. And you know what? Like the better description might be tripped over their shoelaces that were tied. Like, how did you manage to do it kind of thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you manage to trip over a shoelace that was tied? Because a shoelace that is tied is not an issue. And this isn't an issue. It's an underlying issue, I suppose. So maybe it's a shoelace you tripped over that was tied, but it's a shoelace that's about to break anyways, so you just really got unlucky. But what happened is a Fernando Tatis Jr., phenomenal start to the season, by the way, missed a sign on a 3-0 count with the bases loaded. Missed a take sign. Pitcher threw it right down the middle, like every pitcher does on a 3-0 count. And he hit it over the wall. Grand slam. And then the Rangers manager had the audacity to talk about the unwritten rules of baseball being put into jeopardy. He was putting the unwritten rules of baseball at jeopardy. You know what? If you don't want a guy to hit the pitch over the wall on the 3-0 count, why are you throwing a pitch right down the middle? And more importantly, how have we managed to do this again? How are we managing Rangers manager Chris Woodward? He was so mad about Tatis swinging at a 3-0 pitch with the Padres having a big lead. How is this an issue? How are we supposed to take Major League Baseball seriously if they're going to keep doing this? To keep getting in their way? Why are they so against the game growing? Hit the grand slam if he throws a pitch right down the middle. In my opinion, everybody should be swinging for the fences on 3-0. Because you know he's throwing one right down the middle to get a strike. Why would you hand him a strike? You're 3-0, you let a pitch go no matter what, 3-1. He throws a good pitch, 3-2. Now you're ready to ground into a double play. And in the inning with the bases loaded. Swing at the damn pitch. That's what he did. And he hit it over the fence. The fact that Chris Woodward is actually upset about this drives me crazy. There are plenty of issues with baseball. Nobody's watching, it's boring, the games take too long. Whatever you want to put in there. Rob Manfred is a moron. Whatever you want to put in there. But the biggest underlying issue is the fact that nobody wants the game to change. And what that means for baseball, it's synonymous with they don't want the game to grow. And I'm sure I'm making you baseball traditionalists sweat right now. I'm sure I am. Making you sweat with the fact that there's a runner on second base to start the inning in the extras. Making you sweat about anything that could possibly make the game more enjoyable to watch. All these unwritten rules about baseball might as well be titled The Rules About Baseball That Make the Game Boring. The rules about baseball that make the game unattractive to anybody who hasn't been a fan of baseball for their entire life. I like playoff baseball. I'm fine with regular season baseball. But me, I played baseball growing up. Baseball's been a part of my life for a long time. Nobody new is going to get into baseball with the way that the game operates right now. Because anybody who got introduced to baseball for the first time in the last 3 days, or the last 24, 36 hours, what they've seen is that managers get angry when guys hit home runs. That's what's happened in the last day and a half. Why would you want to be a part of that? Why would you want to watch a sport like that? It drives me absolutely crazy that the people that are a part of Major League Baseball are so terrified of change that it's going to drive the sport into the ground. When was the last time you saw a headline from Major League Baseball that was positive? Even the fact that you were going to have a season was tainted by the fact that Rob Manfred just had to make the decision because the Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association couldn't come to an agreement. That's what happened. The beginning of the season wasn't even a positive thing. You had Manfred say, I was going to give him 60, I was going to make 60 games, put my foot down no matter what they said. And then you had the Marlins just being careless and going out to party, and it results in them missing a lot of their games, and the Cardinals have gotten hit even harder. It's been like a year and a half since the Cardinals have played a baseball game. Now, I know they've played baseball games at this point. It was like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. How do you keep doing this? It baffles me. Baffles me. Fernando Tatis is having an absolutely remarkable start to the season. Remarkable. He's playing incredible baseball. He's hitting .310. He's got 11 home runs, 28 RBIs. $11 home runs, 28 RBIs. And we're like a month into the season. 25 games. 25 games, he's already hit 11 home runs. He's electric. Electric. And we're not talking about how electric he is. We're talking about how he's bad for hitting a home run around the innards of baseball. This is the issue. Tatis has a chance to be. He's a young shortstop. He's 21 years old. He's tearing up Major League Baseball. Tearing up Major League Baseball. And we're talking about him being a villain for hitting a pitch over the fence that was right down the middle. He has a chance to be a star. And we're not talking about it like that. Mike Trout is, in terms of dominance in a sport, Mike Trout is up there with anybody right now. Nobody touches the guy in terms of consistent seasons. I mean, he's playing phenomenal baseball too. Incredible baseball. Let's take a look at Mike Trout's stats. He's also hit 10 home runs, and he also has 20 RBIs already. He's a star. Nobody cares about Mike Trout, though, in the world of sports in this country. Baseball keeps hitting themselves in the foot. And it's going to drive the sport into the ground. That's all they've done in the last 6 months is drive the sport into the ground. That's all they've done. They've driven the sport into the ground. And they continue to do so. Embrace your young stars instead of making them, he was asked about it and he said, F you. And now he's the villain even more because he's defending himself for hitting a home run in baseball. Drives me absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. And there doesn't seem like there's ever going to be a point where they are going to change what they're doing. It just doesn't seem like it. So shouts to Fernando Tatis Jr. for hitting a pitch over the wall that looked like it was a pitch he could hit over the wall. Shouts. He's a big-time player, and let's celebrate the big-time players in Major League Baseball instead of turning them into villains. Today, in FYI, Nets Raptors 1:30 p.m. Eastern, Jazz Nuggets 4 p.m. Eastern, Celtics Sixers 6:30 p.m. Eastern, and 9 p.m. Eastern for Mavs Clippers. Tatis, man, it's so frustrating. So frustrating. And of course, Touchline Talk with Josh Doring, Around the Bases with Chris Brown, 11 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110sports. I believe that's all I have for you today. We'll see you back on Friday, hopefully live at 110sportsmedia.com/live. But until then, take care, and I'll see you on Friday.